And so at this point, for our viewers, our audience this evening, we'd like to hang around for a few minutes and talk with you. If you've got any questions, I presume you're following live on Facebook, so you could do that in the comments. But if you have any questions for any of our actors, how they prepared for this, we have a really wide range of Liberty Center performers here. We've brought back we've got a few veterans on here, some new faces, and our younger people that we're really excited to all have in the same mix. It kills me because if I could, I would put this cast on stage right now in a heartbeat to put this play on stage, because these actors and performers have jumped into their roles so well. And I'm sorry, I'm on a cell phone, so my thumb keeps getting in the way of the camera. But if any of our audience members have any questions, anything you'd like to ask any cast members or just the cast in general, or if any of our cast members want to say anything, now's your chance. Go for it.
I would like to give out a shout out to some of the people who've commented on our Facebook stream so far. Lilibeth Sokolovsky, thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. She said that it was amazing and she loved it. Liz Melott gave everyone a bravo. So congratulations to that.
And R.I.P.
And she said, R.I.P. Macbeth. He hopefully is not resting in peace. He is rolling over and burning. And Katie Bonner-Lammers said bravo and gave us several applauses. So congratulations to everyone from that. Lilibeth just asked the question, junior theater people, did you enjoy doing this play more or Midsummer and Much Ado?
Personally, I'd have to say Much Ado, and the ones on stage, since there's such depth to the characters, there's so many layers to them all, and it's a lot of fun to play with them with your friends beside you on stage.
I like this one because the set's a lot easier, and so are the costumes.
Savannah, Sarah, or Caden, any other thoughts?
I can agree with Gracie and Ari on that with the sets. I
feel like this one on stage, it would have been a lot more fun, I think.
Okay.
Than like Midsummer and Much Ado.
Mm-hmm.
Gabriel Sokolovsky just gave roses for everybody, so congratulations again. Katie Boehner-Lammers, I just want to say to Danielle Knight, you were amazing. Both my parents were in this play, but you were my favorite. Your reaction to your family's murder had me in tears. Elizabeth Kell just said, wonderful job, especially on a screen, not a stage. Savannah, I finally saw you. Wonderful job to Miss Lucy from Henry and to Mr. and Mrs. B from Liz and Ted. Just as a show of hands, who has been involved with this script before? Anyone? So Lucy has. Anyone else?
I am sitting in the dark right now, so my camera's off, but I've read it out loud in a classroom setting, and I've seen some fantastic productions of it, but this is the first I've ever directly, really taken it on.
Okay.
It in high school count. I helped the high schoolers with it. That's about it.
Okay. To those of you that have been in the Shakespearean comedy, we did Much Ado a few weeks ago, and then the junior theater students have also done Midsummer Night's Dream. Do you prefer the comedy or the dramas or the tragedy?
Or like,
Oh, are we supposed to raise our hands? Sorry.
Yeah, you're fine. Go ahead.
It's hard to say. I really, personally, like I've been in Much Ado. I was in that in college, and then I did it a few weeks ago, which was really fun to revisit the same role. And I love making people laugh and sometimes if you're unfamiliar with Shakespeare, you're like, oh, that's not funny or whatever, you know, and then you read that script and you're like, oh, this is funny. This is clever. This is really great. You know, it can open your eyes up to, you know, maybe a different kind of comedy than you're used to. So I love that. But I also love the depth that, you know, more serious roles provide. I really, you know, personally enjoy really diving into a character and, really making their struggles seem real, because, you know, maybe other people can relate in a certain way. And so when I play a role that has, you know, a sad component to it, I want to play it realistically. So if others are relating, they can see, you know, me doing like an honest performance as opposed to like, oh, my family's dead, I can't believe it, you know. Like, you know, like I love getting to do like honest, serious performances as well that, you know, do make people feel something. That makes sense.
I'm going to speak to that if I can. I'm actually going to take sort of an opposite position from Danielle. In some ways, as someone who has read and seen and performed numerous Shakespeare's over the years, sometimes I tend to prefer the tragedies and even some of the history plays, as they tend to be a little more straightforward as far as moving the plot along, particularly if you have an audience or audience members who maybe aren't as familiar with the play. The comedies tend to use a lot more comedic references and jokes that we in 2020 just don't always get. It's just outdated humor as far as we're concerned. And that was one thing I found in taking this play, Macbeth, and cutting it down to a much shorter version. I was really pleased with how streamlined the story moved. There were some, admittedly, there were some poetic references and some great passages, and even kind of minor subplots that had to be removed from it. But by and large, I think in the tragedies and in the histories, you still get a more straightforward storyline, that kind of sticks to the meat and potatoes of what's going on, as opposed to the comedies, which sometimes are just filled with comedic references, which audiences in the 1600s would have been just rolling over, but an audience in 2020 may not necessarily get, because some of those references are just lost on us. But that's just my 2 cents.
We got a comment from Shannon Elise, who said, wonderful job, everyone. She loved watching. So Shannon, thank you. We're glad you enjoyed it. So this is the, Chelsea, you raised your hand. What would you like?
Well, I was just going to say that, and so going back a minute, like I enjoy the comedies because I think I can usually find more common ground with them. Like whenever we did Much Ado, there are scenes of people roasting their best friends for being in a relationship. It still happens in 2020. So my preference is for those, because I would hope none of us can identify too much with, you know, too many of the characters in Macbeth. So, you know, personal preference, and I can understand that. So some pieces of literature are actually better than others, but I can like ones that aren't as good better personally. So I was going to ask, if you don't mind, Carl, and everyone assembled, why was Macbeth chosen? Most of the directors have been given a lot of latitude to pick whatever we want. So why did you, our director, decide that Macbeth was the one to go with this time around?
Because the average Shakespearean play is 4 to 5 hours long, and Macbeth comes in at 2.5 hours.
Fair enough.
No, it actually, it seemed like a good choice simply because of the question of this person who's faced with a choice. That's what it really comes down to. One of the things Lucy and I were talking about earlier tonight, the question was, are the witches good or bad? Are the witches a sign of evil, or are the witches, what are they? And we were talking about it, and really, if you look at the witches, they're not necessarily good and bad, but what they do is they present Macbeth with a choice. They tell him what they see is going to happen to him, but ultimately he has to make the choice to carry out these terrible actions. And it's compounded by the fact that once he gives the word to his wife that, hey, I've been handed these prophetic visions by these mysterious witches, that's when his wife's ambition sort of takes over. I have seen productions where Macbeth and Lady Macbeth were cast as much older actors, and that it was given the impression that Macbeth had been in service of the king for a long time and had maybe been passed over several times for promotions or titles, and that, you know, Lady Macbeth was maybe getting a little sick of it, and that was ready for her husband to sort of grasp some ambition and try to take on something larger in life. And so I've always been fascinated by the power of choices in this play. Macbeth has choices to make. Lady Macbeth has choices to make. Macduff makes the choice to leave his family and not even tell them that he's leaving. Malcolm and even a character that was ultimately cut from this play, Donalbain, who is King Duncan's other son that we don't really see much of. They have to make the choice to flee based on the information they have. And I've just always found that interesting. Just like any Shakespearean tragedy, there's always one event that can set off a drastic chain of events. Anybody who's read or seen Romeo and Juliet sees how one simple action can lead to a chain reaction of events that affect so many people's lives. And Macbeth in this play just happens to stumble with Banquo upon these three mysterious women who tell him something that he can believe or not believe. And he chooses to believe it, and he chooses to act on it. And that's always the thing that I found just really interesting about this play, the power of choice. Now, Lucy, you're sitting there. Now, you know, I know you've been a fan of Lady Macbeth for a while, and you're also my partner in crime in putting this show together. You know, what would be your take on that?
Well, I feel like one of the things that we all had talked about, like the whole entire cast, not just me and Chris, about like making Shakespeare accessible. And I think that that's really important, like especially when we're doing things a little bit different. And I will absolutely agree with our junior theater performers that like we all wish we could be on stage and be like reacting and interacting with one another. And it's been so rewarding to get to do something like this where it has big feelings and big emotions, and we're doing it just, you know, in front of our device right here, but we're still doing it all together. And like I've really enjoyed like working on the tragedies and the comedies. I'm kind of like a little bit of both of like, you know, Chelsea's and Danielle's response, where it's like I love them both for different reasons. And like, I think that they bring something different to our audience. And I surely hope that our audience has enjoyed like some of the variety that all of our LCAA actors and performers and technicians have been able to bring to this format. We're kind of we're exploring, and we're like kind of taking a new actor adventure just so we can still be creative with one another. And I'm so glad to get to work with you all. Thanks.
So we've had a few more comments come in. First, to everyone who's watching, be aware there's about a 1 minute delay between what we do and what you see. So if it feels like we're responding late, it's probably because we just saw the comment. So we had another comment from Lilibeth. This cast was really good. Everyone took their roles in a really creative way, especially Ari and Lucy. I really loved the way they took their role. So, Kelly Rogers chimed in, the witches chose to appear, so she feels that they are actually bad. Kelly, I would agree with you. Shannon Elise again, Lucy's scene where Lady Macbeth starts to lose her mind was so good. You did amazing, Lucy. And then Shannon also wants to know, where's Tommy Waller? Why do you have your camera off? She wants to look at your bearded mug. There he is.
There you go. There it is.
Tommy, I do have to say, I love your rendition of Macbeth. He is one of my favorite characters, and the Tomorrow speech I've known since high school, and I thought it was perfect.
Oh man, thank you so much. Gosh, it's one of my favorites too. I've always been pretty enamored with Macbeth, and honestly, man, I'm just happy to have been here and been able to do this with you guys. So thank you all for giving me this chance.
I've known Tommy for many years, particularly through the Liberty Center, and we were really happy to have him on board for this because we haven't seen Tommy at Liberty Center for a few years now. He's up in Kansas City slugging it out. And, actually, I'm going to take a little side road here, Tommy. You are someone who has branched off into the world of, getting your foot in the door of professional theater. You've worked with some theaters in Kansas City and started to do some professional work. Talk about what happened for you and in your life when current situation took over and everything kind of went into stay-at-home lockdown. What does that do for a working actor who's trying to get their foot in the door?
Oh man, I mean, everybody was affected up here. I mean, I can say, simply put, I mean, I was literally in the middle of an acting job. We were about a week away from opening a production of Mother the Maid up here at Metropolitan Ensemble Theater, and things have been kind of rumbling around, and everybody was so unsure about what was going on, what was going to happen, all this and that, and everything was kind of up in the air. And tentatively, we kind of soldiered on. We're like, well, we're gonna stick with this, as long as we can, until, of course, finally everything came crashing down, and it was forced to shut down the production. And I mean, it's just, it is what it is. I mean, you can say, for one, it's like, layman's terms, yeah, I just got robbed of a job. That was an opportunity, kind of a rug pulled out. But I mean, it's aside from just, oh, I'm not able to work, I mean, just that artistic experience, that appreciation you have of whatever show you're doing at the time. Of course, you just love doing what you're doing. That's 90% of probably why all of us who are doing this got into it, just because we love it so much. So, I mean, it sucks. it's rough, man. I mean, it's hard up here. There's a pretty strong community of theater actors, artists, all that up here, and it's been rough, man.
And any student of history knows that there have been times throughout world history when theaters have had to be shuttered for plague conditions. So this is, in a way, to quote Shakespeare, this is nothing new under the sun, in a way. Carl, I'm going to defer the next question to you because Carl is also a theater industry professional, although more on the technical side of things, not only in lighting and sound and scenery, but also being involved in a company that literally designs and builds theaters. Carl, can you speak to how have you seen your face of the industry change over the last couple months?
The construction side of the industry actually hasn't slowed down. Most of the work that we do is in education, high schools, middle schools, things of that nature. And we're always trying to find summers to build in. Well, we just got 2 more months added to our summer this year, so everybody is cranking to try and get as much work as they can done. We have some jobs that are just getting started that people have kind of started slow playing. So in my industry, I'm concerned that we'll start feeling it in 9 months or a year.
Sure.
But who knows? We do have a few more comments. We've got 2 from Kelly Rogers. She's commenting, when she taught Macbeth at high school, she got on YouTube and watched several versions of the witches. She found them very interesting characters, and her students loved them and were absolutely terrified. So the witches got strong props from Kelly. And I agree, Kelly, I really do like the witches. Question from Lilibeth. Were there any scenes that you didn't like very much in tonight's production?
Ooh, that's interesting. Anyone want to chime in on that? Is there a scene in the show you just don't particularly care for?
Blasphemy.
Yeah,
So good.
to say I've discovered I really don't like being the bearer of bad news. Telling people that their family members have died is not my thing. It's hard. It's really hard. My heart goes out to anybody that would have to do that for real.
Well, and it's funny too, because like we all have such different relationships to each scene. Like, I mean, like there's so many things that are so like when you have heard a lot of things that have been repeated before, out damn spot, and things like like Sound and the Fury, and things that like are repeated in like culture, popular culture, like from Shakespeare's time on. There's a little bit of pressure to some things where you're like, ooh, how is this supposed to be delivered, because people are expecting it a certain way. So it's not that I don't like certain scenes, but I think that like and in all honesty, it's like you love it, but like you're so sad. It's the Macduff scene where like Danielle's all like, oh my, all my pretty ones, like I love it, but I hate it because it's so emotional. Mm-hmm.
As the one who kind of did the book work on this script, I could really say the scenes I don't like are the ones that didn't make it into the final cut. There's something about Macbeth where Shakespeare has left he leaves some loose ends that never really get addressed. As I mentioned earlier, King Duncan, who gets obviously murdered by Macbeth, he actually has two sons, Malcolm and Donalbain. Malcolm flees to England. Donalbain flees to Ireland. And we hear a little bit about Donalbain after he flees, but there's no resolution to it. You kind of expect Donalbain to come riding over the hill with the Irish forces to help out against Macbeth, but he never does. Also, Banquo and Brad, who's done such a great job of playing Banquo, the guy who's kind of the straight man to Macbeth, of like, oh, the witches are saying great things about me too, but it really seems like this is all really kind of falling on Macbeth and that he's going to come out great. Banquo has a son named Fleance that ultimately I cut from the play. Again, we're trying to get this down to a very watchable length, and so that it doesn't take up a great deal of time. When Banquo was murdered, which I made the decision not to actually show that scene, I wanted it to be implied so that we all knew what happened, that Banquo had been killed by the murderers. They go after Banquo's son as well, Fleance, and Fleance escapes from the murderers. He actually lives, but again, there's no resolution. Fleance doesn't come riding back over the hill with the forces that are going to help save the day. And so that was a weird thing. So in essence, some of the scenes I didn't like as much and that I didn't think moved the story along as well, especially for a format like this, where we're all speaking into cell phones and tablets and laptops. I cut it more so we could have a straight storyline that moved almost more, hopefully, like a movie than like a play, for the shorter time span that we were going for. So again, that's my 2 cents right there.
We have a few more comments. This is from Elizabeth Kell. Ariana, your black screen and costume was great. You were my daughter's favorite.
I will concur with that.
I agree. And then a comment from Amber Beyer. I'd love to definitely see more from Megan Drianis. I think she did fabulous.
Pipe up, Megan. Let's hear from you.
Thank you, Amber. She's my best friend. Of course, she would say something like that. I had lots of fun doing this. I love the dramatic plays. I just love getting into a character and being dramatic and evoking emotions out of people. So I had a lot of fun.
I have to speak to Megan because like I love Lady Macduff, and like I feel so bad for her, and like she's so good, and we have to like give credit where credit is always due. Megan like jumped on kind of at the last minute and like was right there and right in it, and like from the get-go, Megan, like you have been fantastic. Like I love your take on Lady Macbeth, our Lady Macduff, and like it's just like it's fantastic. Like and like oh, it's so sad when your son. I know. I mean, and granted, I'm just watching at that point, but I'm like, oh, great reactions. Like I love your reactions, Megan. Right on.
Thank you.
Megan actually joined the cast about 10 minutes before our first rehearsal started.
Yes.
So it was tight.
And one thing I'll say about Lady Macduff is she's one of those Shakespearean characters that gets one scene to make it all happen. To tell this story in the midst of this long tale, she gets one impactful scene that kind of lays it all out. And to me, it's one of the most powerful scenes in the play. The way Megan and Caden had this exchange with one another that was really great. And then just going back a bit to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, the scene where Ross delivers terrible news to Macduff about the death of Lady Macduff, and there's so much that happens in this play, and so many interesting things to watch. But those are really two of my favorite scenes, and I was really, really happy with the way that our actors portrayed them, again, in this limited format where we don't get to see your body. We don't get to see your body language and your full reaction to it, and to hear an audience in real time reacting to it. Just kudos to you actors, all of you actors in these scenes, because you're just great.
Another comment from Kelly Rogers. Kelly is pointing out that Fleance has to live for the prophecy to come true, which actually brings up a question of mine. So do the witches saying that Banquo will beget kings, is that implying that Banquo's lineage will become kings, or is that implying that Banquo's death will drive others to unseat Macbeth?
That, I think, is the coin toss in this play. And that's the interesting thing about it, because, again, we never see the return of Fleance. We don't know what happens after Malcolm takes the throne. For all we know, Donalbain comes riding back in Macbeth Part 2 and challenges his brother for the throne. Fleance, riding on the power of prophecy, could challenge for the throne. And there's another interesting scene, and this was the one that probably pained me the most to sort of have to trim down from this play. The scene between Malcolm and Macduff. We've trimmed it down to where Malcolm says, hey, Macbeth's a bad guy, and we got to go get him, right? And Macduff says, yeah, we got to go get him. In the full text of the play, there's a really interesting scene between Malcolm and Macduff where Malcolm says to Macduff, you realize I'm going to be a way worse king than Macbeth, right? If we go in and kill Macbeth, you're going to end up with someone who may be worse than Malcolm or worse than Macbeth. And Macduff is just kind of dumbfounded by this. He's like, you've just admitted to me that you're going to be a terrible king and that you have bloody and lustful desires that are worse than Macbeth. I can't believe this. This is terrible. This is terrible for Scotland. And Malcolm says, wow, I'm so moved by your words and how loyal you are to Scotland that, you know what, if I am elected king, I promise I'll be a good guy and I won't do this bad stuff. But that's such an interesting thing that Shakespeare tucks into this play of like, oh, when the good guy becomes king, the good guy may not actually be the best guy of all. And again, so there's a lot of unresolved stuff in this play that we can wonder about. If in the time of Shakespeare it had been popular to write sequels, and I know he wrote some of his plays in multiple parts because they were so long that it took 2 or 3 parts to tell them. But in a way, I kind of wish there had been a Macbeth Part 2, because there are some loose ends that could have played out to be really interesting storylines.
So we've been going just about long enough. I have a final question, both for the cast and for the listeners. Should we do more tragedies, more serious plays, or should we stick with comedies, or do you care? A lot of people are saying they don't care. They'll just do anything. All right. I like that attitude.
I want to hear from a cast member we have not heard from in this talkback. So if you haven't spoken yet, now's your chance. Get on it.
I will literally do anything.
I have greatly enjoyed being a part of it. It's been years since I was on the stage. And I'm slow coming back. I realize that. But I would love to have a chance to get involved now that I have a little bit more time in my life. Somebody asked earlier about a part and how they felt about a part. It was a good part for me to play King Schlemazel. If you know what a Schlemazel is, you realize that Duncan is the epitome of Schlemazels in this play. And I've been dying to say this for anybody that will understand the reference, because people ask me, that realize I'm doing this, and my response was always, well, they lose me right after the bunka scene. So that's for anybody that gets that reference. Thank you very much for including me, and everybody did a great job. It's been great fun.
I very much agree with Richard's sentiment there. I thought this cast was exceptional. Everyone did a great job, so thank you for taking part.
Yes.
And we've been going about a half an hour after we ended. I think that's probably long enough. I know I've been sitting in the same chair for about 4 hours now.
Hey,
thank you to the cast and to everyone who's been watching. Thank you very much. Please pay attention to Facebook to see when our next presentation will be. Everyone, have a wonderful evening and stay safe.
Support the arts. We love you.